Brazilian names are super difficult to pronounce. Let me give you a few examples. João. Hector. No, there's no C in that. Heitor. Heitor. Guilherme. Gilherme. Thighs. Ties. Tays. Tiago. Tigo. Well, this one's simple. Mate. Well, at least I got that one right. So that's just a couple of Brazilian names. And when I arrived in Brazil, I found it very difficult to pronounce these names. I mean, at the beginning I pronounced them like that, but obviously then I realized I was pronouncing them completely wrong. And for some names it was pretty quick and easy for me to change my pronunciation, but there were a couple of Brazilian names which took a long time for me to be able to pronounce them correctly. And the reason why I found it difficult to pronounce these names was, first of all, you don't really come across these names in Sweden and in many other countries. So I had no experience of how to pronounce them. And then secondly, in Portuguese, you pronounce certain letters and words very differently to how you pronounce them in Swedish. And the result of that was me pronouncing the names like I did. But now let's go through these names and other names, and I'll try and pronounce them correctly. So the first one is João. So it's not João or something like that. It's João. So the English equivalent of João would be John. So this is a very common name in Brazil. The next one is Heitor. So you don't pronounce the H. The H is silent in Portuguese. So it's not Heitor. No, it's Heitor. And the English equivalent would be Hector. And then the next one is pronounced Guilherme. So it's not Guilherme or something like that. And actually one funny thing with this name is that the English equivalent is William, which I found a bit weird because there's no resemblance at all between these two names in my mind. Next one you've got is Thais, and this one can be spelt with an H in there or without an H. It's not thighs or something like that, like the part of the leg. No, it's Thais. And then you've got Tiago. Again, can be spelled with an H or without an H. And yeah, it's not Tiago or Tigo or something like that. And the English equivalent of Tiago is Jacob or James. I'm not sure quite how that is, but apparently that's what Google told me anyway. And then finally, it's not mate, it's Maitê. So again, yeah, super different pronunciation between how I initially pronounced it and how you should pronounce it here in Brazil. And then let's have a look at a few more names that I totally pronounced wrong when I got here in Brazil. The first one is Paulo. So it's not Paulo or something like that. No, Paulo. And then you got this one here. Now this one is pretty common. I mean, I'd seen this one before I got to Brazil, but I pronounced this name as you would in some Spanish-speaking countries. So I said Jose. That's not how you pronounce it here in Brazil. It's José. And the English equivalent would be Joseph. And then we've got this, which isn't Henrik or Enrique or something like that. No, this is Enrique. So again, you got the H, which is silent, so it just becomes Enrique. And the English equivalent would be Henry. And again, I found it a bit funny because when one of my Brazilian friends were talking about some English kings, talking about Henry VIII, and he said Henrique Oitavo. When he said that initially, I was like, what king are you talking about? Because I had no idea that Henrique is the Portuguese equivalent of Henry, and again, they have the H silent as well, so all you hear is Henrique. And this was at the beginning when I'd moved to Brazil, and there was no way that my Portuguese was good enough for me to be able to connect that, and Henrique meant Henry. And another one is this one, which I initially pronounced Ander, but oh, it's André. Again, this is a very common name, and the English equivalent would be Andrew. And then you got this one, which is Laís. It's not Lays or something like that. No, it's Laís. And then you've got this one here, which I took a long time to work out how to say. So I initially pronounced it Aclecchio. Oh, no, it's not. It's Acclesio. But then you also have lots of names which are common in Sweden and in the UK and other countries. It's just that you pronounce them very different. So some examples are Amanda. So in Brazil, it's pronounced Amanda. You've got Camilla, which is Camilla. And then you got Fred, which in Brazil you pronounce Fredji, which for me sounds a bit funny. And then you got Alice, which is Alici, so that's a very different pronunciation. Then you got Laura, which is Laura. Thomas, which is Tomas. Beatrice, Beatriz. And you got Larissa, which is Larissa. And then 2 names of celebrities, which I find very funny how they pronounce here in Brazil. First one is Brad Pitt, which becomes Brad Pitchy. And the other one is Will Smith, which becomes Will Schmitchy. So I love how Brazilians pronounce those 2 names. And I can't pronounce them like that. So if I talk to a Brazilian about Brad Pitt or Will Smith, then I just have to pronounce them like the English do. I can't pronounce them like the Brazilians do. And I'm sure some of the names that I've pronounced now, I'm not pronouncing 100% correct. So if you're Brazilian watching this and you want to correct me, then go ahead and put it in the commentary below. And then another thing which I found very different here in Brazil compared to Sweden was that a lot of first names, they end with S-O-N, so son. So you got, for example, Anderson and Jefferson and names like that. So a lot of Brazilians have these names as their first name, which is very different to Sweden. So in Sweden, loads of people have names like this, but it's their surnames. I don't think I've come across one Swedish person that has a name like this as their first name. But here in Brazil, it's very common, so lots of people call Anderson, Jefferson, Edison, Gerson, and there's even a very famous Brazilian YouTuber as well. So his name is Whindersson, and that's his first name, not his surname. And then another thing which is very different to Swedish names and a lot of English names as well, is that Brazilians can have lots of first names, middle names, surnames. So we can be quite long names. And one of the reasons for that, which I was told, is that a lot of Brazilians, they have both their mother and father's surname in their names. So Brazilians, they can have like 4, 5 or 6 names in total, which is quite different to Swedish people. I mean, it depends. I'm sure some have it in Sweden, but if I think about my Swedish family, everyone that I know have 3 names. A first name, a middle name, and a surname. But here in Brazil, I know lots of people have 4, 5, 6 names. So just to give you an example, so Neymar, the big famous Brazilian football player, so his full name is Neymar da Silva Santos Jr. And the reason why he's got his name is because he took his mother's surname, which is da Silva, and then he took his father's surname, which is Santos, and then his father's name is also Neymar, so therefore they added the name Junior to his son. So yeah, if you come to Brazil, you're gonna meet lots of people with quite long names. And then another thing is that lots of Brazilians, they have names which are English names or European names, but they've spelt them slightly differently. So you've got names like Jenny, for example. They pronounce like Jenny, but they spell it differently. So what I've seen is that a lot put a D at the beginning, so it becomes Jenny with a D. And another one would be Stephanie, for example, but they spell Stephanie completely different. So they put in a TH and another double N's, and it's spelled very differently, but it sounds the same. And you've got Wesley, for example, which they spelled with a C in there, and then Michael as well. So a lot of people called Maicon here in Brazil, which is kind of Michael spelled differently as well. And one funny one which I heard, which I think is true, is that one person's name is Valdisney. So this person got named after Walt Disney because I think their parents really liked Disney, but they don't spell it that. They spell it with a V and they remove the T as well, so it becomes Valdisney. So you have some names like that, and there are some other funny examples as well. But then turning things around, also there are lots of English names which Brazilians have problems pronouncing. So I'll give you a few. So the first one is Gwyneth, so Gwyneth Paltrow. So this is a name that my Brazilian wife had problems pronouncing. So I think it's pronounced Gwyneth or something like that in Brazil. So that one is Hugh Jackman from the Wolverine movies. So this was another challenge for my wife. So it kind of became Oogie Jackman rather than Hugh Jackman. And then you got Sean Connery. Sean becomes Sean Shun. And another name, which I think is a bit challenged for even English speakers, is Saoirse Ronan. So that's an Irish name. She's an Irish actress. And when I asked my Brazilian friends to pronounce her name, it became Saoirse or something like that. Like I said, that's a challenge even for some English speakers. And then another Irish name similar to that is Siobhan, which I think some of my friends pronounced Siobhan or something like that. So you got Swedish names as well, which is a big challenge for Brazilians. So I have a friend in Sweden, his name is Åke. So I think my wife calls him Aki. And then a fairly common name in Sweden is Björn, which means bear, which I've heard them pronounce Bjorni. And then you got Maja, which becomes Maja. And then you got another one, which is Ulle, which I think my Brazilian friends pronounced Olli. Well, now it's Ulle. And then I also got Ingemar, which Brazilians pronounce as Ingimar, but no, it's Ingemar. So yeah, so we Swedes, we have some serious problems pronouncing some Brazilian names, but also Brazilians have problems pronouncing some English and Swedish names, and sometimes the results can be pretty funny. So if you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe. If you've got any questions or anything, or if you want to tell me that I've pronounced some of the Brazilian names wrong, put it in the commentary below. So thanks for watching, until next time.